Hello, that's the beginning of Weisenborn's study number 39. And that's being used this year as an audition piece for Kentucky 2020 All-State. I'm Peter Simpson, professor of Bassoon at the University of Kentucky, and this video is intended to give you some help for preparing this. A couple things to consider right off the bat. The key in which this study appears is a little unusual perhaps for you. C sharp minor, 4 sharps, and playing in C sharp sounds a little like this. That sort of feeling. It also is in 9/8 time, and in 9/8 time, each beat of the measure is divided into 3/8 notes, but there are 3 sort of big beats in the measure. So you have these sort of micro waltzes within each beat, but then the whole measure is also a triple meter, kind of like a waltz is. So it's challenging to get both of those concepts going. What makes it even more challenging in this case is that Weisenborn has arranged the first few notes in such a way that it doesn't feel like they're grouped in threes. You know, this, for instance, in bar 56 in your part, this is like 3 bars from the end, you've got a pattern that looks like one note followed by a twos. It appears that the notes are basically grouped in pairs of notes. Well, the beams, of course, are in threes, but the pattern of the notes feels more like duples, so that's a little bit odd as well. It's another one of the challenges that we face in this particular etude. One way to consider that would be, okay, I've got to figure out how to inflect these notes so that it feels like 3 beats to the whole measure. I could excerpt out the most important notes. So in that particular measure, let me try to play all these notes pretty neutrally. Going to the downbeat of the next bar. So to me, that's an important note. Happens to be C sharp, which is our main note of the key. And I feel like that note, G sharp, was kind of a goal note, so I like that one. And then there's another C sharp on the 3rd beat. So if I just took out this first C sharp, the middle G sharp, and the next C sharp, and then the downbeat of the next measure. So if I'm thinking 1, 2, 3, that's pretty easy to feel kind of a waltzy feel with that. So that would be something you can do in these cases where it looks like the notes are grouped in duples. Now if I slow that down, let's see, the instructions were somewhere close to 60. So if I did that at this pace, so what I'm doing there is I'm giving some good impetus, some good weight to the first note, coming away a little bit. I continue to come away, but then I'm going to go through that note, through the 3rd beat. So it's like I'm going 1, 2, 3, 1. So I get that feeling. Now if I put that into the context of all those notes, I can think about that structure in the background. Okay. Another thing that's important in any minor key is to consider something that music theory people call tendency tones. So earlier I played this fragment of C sharp minor, and at the bottom of it, that note, which you probably think of as a C, but is notated as B sharp, if I hit that that note after establishing the key, we're not satisfied. We want it to go back to C sharp. So B sharp always wants to get to C sharp. Doesn't always get to go there, but it wants to. Similarly, A wants to fall down to G sharp. All right. So a typical pattern would be something like that, using both of those so-called tendency tones. And you can hear that they have a little extra emotion in them. That sort of feeling. Now, if I were to put those next to one another, like coming down the scale, this is what we call a harmonic minor scale. So that top part feels a little bit unusual. If I just stayed up there, it sounds a little like Middle Eastern music. So it's not something that occurs as often in our classical music. Just as a comparison's sake, if I come down with B natural instead of B sharp, that feels a little less disruptive, I guess. I'll play those two back to back. You can hear that that top part is more striking when I have the B sharp in there. So we're going to experience both kinds of things within this piece, where these so-called tendency tones go where we want them to and seem to have their normal roles, and other times when they're next to one another and it feels kind of striking. All right, in bars 38 to 45 of the piece, we have a situation where I'm going to not do the dynamics in the piece. We have a descending scale followed by music that's more like the beginning of the piece. That goes on for several bars. One way to get the overall flow of that before you work out the notes is to just think about this for a second. So the first bar I just played, I went through an octave. So I could just take out of there, well, the main thought there is it's the note C sharp that goes through the octave. And then it went to a B sharp, one of those tendency tones. So I could simplify that by going, let me do that first and then the actual passage. So that it's embedded in there somehow. If I went on with those simplifications, the next idea would be next one, and the next one. So what I did in each of those cases, just to get a general underpinning in the music, was in the descending scale measures, I took the first and last notes, and I played half note, quarter note, and then I simply played the downbeat of the next measure each time. I'll do that again. Sorry about the one error. You see I'm going much faster than we would go in the real piece. And you get a sense of the flow and the fact that the whole thing is working its way to a certain goal. So I think that can be useful in your practice. Now, this is actually set up with those scales in kind of an unusual layout for articulation or accents or whatever. And what's going on here is we have the scale slurred, but under, or I should say above each note, is an accent mark. Well, you're used to accenting when you tongue, but in this case, we're only tonguing the first note. So what you're going to do instead is give a little puff of air on each one of these notes. It's sort of like a belly laugh, like you're ho, 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 that sort of thing. So it would sound like this. And when we arrive at the next downbeat, it has this little RF, which indicates an even stronger accent, and this one you get to tongue. So that's going to happen in each case. Notice there's a little crescendo at the end, so you don't want to get too loud or I'm going to exaggerate something. I could start out kind of boldly, come back a little bit, and then crescendo like this. So that way I can clearly show that crescendo. But we want that sort of ho, ho, ho business going on with the slurred accents and then really arrive on that downbeat. The one exception is the last scale coming down from high F sharp. This time there is no special accent on the next downbeat. It just says espressivo. So we'd have something more like this. So in that case, I kind of pulled back on that arrival. I actually pulled back tempo-wise just to show something different's going to happen here. And then you're just nice and expressive and dolce with that next measure. That measure that I was just playing is a little bit tricky rhythmically with those 16th notes in there. So one thing you might modify as you're learning it would be to change the 16th note into an 8th note. So you're going quarter, eighth, dotted quarter, tied to quarter, eighth. It would sound like this. And then you could take a little pause, adjust yourself for playing soft in the high range. So those two things might be helpful in the learning process. Just simplify the rhythm slightly and give yourself more time between the loud lower section and the piano section that's up high. For many of you, there may be some intonation issues in the higher version. So this note E, if I don't do anything to adjust it, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the one finger E, and then I'm going to go up an octave without any adjustment. And you can hear how flat that upper E is. That's a note that will easily play under pitch. So what you need to do is change your oral cavity. You're thinking more like you're saying the syllable E. It's like O-E to get that upper one in tune. When we go to the high G sharp, we're getting into a range where tone quality and intonation are simply more difficult. There are many different fingerings for high G sharp. You might explore some of them. For me, one thing that I do if I possibly can is I use the whisper key on this. And the one that I used in this particular instance for my right hand, I had thumb on the B flat key, middle finger down, and ring finger on the G key. And that gives a nice full sound, which is pretty well in tune. Many of you have learned to only use the ring finger on the G key, which I could make work, but it's a little more effort to get it to sound nice and round. And it can be a little sharper. Okay, finally, when we are at the end of the piece, the last 10 bars are pretty dramatic and have quite a bit of dynamic markings in them. On the other hand, I think you should do a little bit more, believe it or not, than is marked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play for you the last 10 bars, and let me go through this first so you know what I'm about. In the beginning it says forte and sonoro. Well, that translates to sonorous, or a nice full sound. So that first part, I'm pretty full, and I go up maybe to fortissimo on the A in that crescendo and then decrescendo. So by the next bar, I'm back to forte. I'll probably stay approximately forte till the end of that bar where the diminuendo is marked, but I'm not going to come down very far in the next measure, maybe at the beginning of it, maybe a mezzo forte, and at the most, when I get to the low A, maybe mezzo piano. So I'll start in the second bar of this. Maybe about to there. Now, although it says in the music that we should be diminuendoing all the way through this, to me, this that little tie there, that's kind of a significant, unexpected event. So I like to crescendo a little bit to that and maybe give it a little sense of weight, a little tenuto, that sort of thing. At the end of the measure, we have what music theory people will call an anticipation, and then we're going to land on that A, which you may remember, that's one of those tendency tones. And it goes down to the G, but then gets even tenser when we go to that F double sharp, which obviously isn't in the key. So in that case, I'm soft, I crescendo a little bit, all the way through that low F double sharp, and then I come away. And I can come to piano at that point. Now I know that I've got a ways to go with another diminuendo, so I'm going to come up to mezzo forte here. And fade away. Now I'm going to start mezzo piano. Fade away. Now I'll start piano rather than as marked pianissimo, but I'll try to be pianissimo on the next downbeat. So I do that again. And I think I can crescendo all the way up to a nice healthy mezzo forte. I'm going to hold that pretty much through that note. I'm going to wait until the tied portion before I start decrescendoing, get to maybe mezzo piano in the last bar, and again I'm going to wait to decrescendo so I can make a nice taper at the end. So again, the last few bars. And what we'd ideally like is to have that last note sort of disappear into nothingness, and you need a good reed to be able to do that. But that's our goal. And if it lasts a little bit longer than is printed, that's actually kind of a good thing, because if you're in a room with any kind of resonance, we're going to still hear a note fading out. So let me play that whole last 10 bars now with those different nuances in there. So I hope all of those ideas are going to be helpful. This is a pretty challenging one, so take your time and work out the details before you just start at the beginning and crash your way through every time. Good luck with that. I also have PDF file where I've written all the music out of these things that I've been describing. You may be able to get access to that from the same place you got this video, but if not, email me at peter.simpson@uky.edu and I'll send you one. Thanks.